You think you're so special, don't you? My mother's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. You dropped out of nursing school to bake cookies. Cookies, Reese. That's what you gave up your future for. I didn't answer. I'd learned a long time ago that answering only made it worse. She set her coffee mug down hard on the counter. Your sister graduated with honors last spring. Did you know she's already been promoted? She calls us every Sunday. She paused. You haven't called in 3 weeks. My father didn't look up from his newspaper. That was his way of agreeing with everything she said without having to say it himself. I was standing in their kitchen holding a box of pastries I'd brought from my bakery. Kouign-amann, the kind that took me 4 years to perfect. Layers of laminated dough, caramelized butter, a crust that shattered when you bit into it. I'd driven 40 minutes to bring them here because I don't know what I thought. I set the box on the counter next to my mother's coffee mug. She didn't open it. You should have stayed in school, she said. At least then you'd have something to show for yourself. I picked up my keys. Reese. My father finally spoke. He still hadn't looked up. Your mother's right. You made a choice and now you have to live with it. Don't come around here expecting us to celebrate you for making bread. I walked out without saying goodbye. That was 8 months ago. I was 31 years old and my parents had decided, somewhere along the way, that I was the family's cautionary tale. To understand how we got there, you have to understand what my family valued. My mother had been an OR nurse for 26 years. My father had spent 3 decades in hospital administration. My older sister had followed them both into medicine. She was finishing her residency in internal medicine when I was starting my 2nd year of nursing school. We were a medical family. That was the identity, the thing my parents introduced first at dinner parties and holiday gatherings. I was supposed to be part of that. But I had been baking since I was 7 years old, standing on a step stool next to my grandmother, measuring flour, watching her hands move through dough with the kind of confidence I wanted for myself. When I was in college, I started selling things at the weekend farmers market near campus. Sourdough loaves, croissants, little custard tarts. People came back every week. Some of them started bringing their neighbors. Nursing school was never a bad fit because I wasn't capable. I passed every exam. I liked my clinical rotations well enough. But I'd come home after 12-hour shifts and spend 2 hours in my apartment kitchen just to feel like myself again. I couldn't picture doing this for 30 years the way my mother had. I could picture the other things so clearly it sometimes frightened me. I withdrew from nursing school the spring of my 2nd year. I told my parents by phone. My mother cried. My father said very quietly that he didn't want to discuss it. Then he hung up. Over the next few years, I didn't talk much about what I was building. I'd learned early that sharing progress only invited skepticism. And skepticism from people you loved was harder to shake off than the ordinary kind. So I kept my head down. I rented a small commercial kitchen space on the east side of town. I worked 7 days a week for the first 2 years. I hired my first employee, a culinary school graduate named Petra, who was 22, and faster than anyone I'd ever watched work, 18 months after that. By the time my parents told me not to come back until I had something worth showing for myself, I had a 2,400 square foot flagship bakery on one of the most visible corners in the city. I had a catering operation that handled corporate accounts and private events. I had a wholesale line carried by 14 specialty grocery stores across 3 states. I had been written up twice in regional food publications and once in a national one. I had 23 employees. None of that was information my parents had because they'd never asked. Not once in 4 years had either of them said, "What are you working on? How is the business? Are you okay?" They called my sister every Sunday and asked about her patients. They sent her articles about developments in internal medicine. When she got her promotion, they threw her a dinner party and invited 40 people. I heard about it from her afterward, a text that said simply, "Family thing last night. Hope you're well." I was not bitter about my sister, that's important to say. She was talented and she worked incredibly hard, and she deserved everything she'd earned. What I felt wasn't jealousy. It was something quieter and more exhausting, the particular loneliness of being invisible inside your own family. After I left their house that afternoon with my pastries untouched on their counter, I decided I was done trying. Not done in a dramatic way. I didn't write a letter or make a declaration. I just stopped initiating contact. I focused entirely on work. We were preparing to launch a second location in a neighborhood that had been underserved for years. A place where I thought a real bakery. Not a chain, not a franchise, something with an actual identity, could matter. I was also in early conversations with a boutique hotel group about a potential partnership. Those conversations had been going on for 6 months and they were starting to look serious. I didn't think about my parents much. That sounds cold, but it was the truth. When you spend years trying to make people see you and they consistently refuse, eventually the trying just exhausts itself. Then, on a Thursday in late October, my operations manager texted me at 8 in the morning. "Your family is here, the whole situation. Should I come get you?" I read the message twice. My sister had mentioned weeks earlier that she was attending a conference that weekend. Something about innovations in clinical care, hosted downtown. What I didn't know, and had no way of knowing, was that the hotel hosting the conference had recently finalized a partnership with my bakery. We were providing all their pastry service for the weekend event. My name and my bakery's name were on the printed menus at every table. And my mother, apparently, had driven up to attend a Saturday morning session and decided to bring my father, and they had decided to arrive a day early and have breakfast at the hotel's restaurant. Which was, as of 6 weeks ago, mine. I put my phone in my pocket. I walked through the back corridor from our production kitchen into the front dining area. I saw my parents before they saw me. They were seated near the window. My mother had one of our morning menus open in front of her. My father was looking out at the street with his coat still on. The way he always sat in places he wasn't sure he wanted to be. My sister was there too, sitting across from them, and she was the one who spotted me first. Her expression shifted. Not alarm. Exactly. More like someone who understood immediately that this situation was going to require very careful navigation. My mother looked up. The moment she registered what she was seeing, something happened to her face. The composure she'd worn my entire life, the nurse's composure, the one that had gotten her through decades of difficult things, it flickered. She looked at me, then at the menu in her hands, then back at me. My father turned from the window. For a long moment, no one spoke. I walked over to the table. "Good morning," I said. My mother set the menu down. "Reese, I didn't know you were coming to the conference," I said. "My sister didn't mention it. I didn't know until last week." My mother's voice was careful, controlled. She was already working to get her composure back. "We thought we'd surprise her." I nodded. "Do you need anything? I can have someone bring you coffee." My father's jaw tightened. "You work here?" "I own it," I said. He looked around the room slowly. The exposed brick, the long wooden counter with the pastry cases, the chalkboard menu above the espresso bar, the staff moving efficiently through the morning rush. He took his time looking at all of it. "This is yours," he said. Not a question, more like a man trying to arrange something in his mind that refused to fit the shape it was supposed to. "This is the flagship," I said. "We opened the second location in March." My sister looked at the table. She already knew. She'd visited the second location during its soft opening, which I'd invited her to, and which she'd come to alone without telling our parents. She had held a Queen Aman and said, quietly, "You should be really proud of yourself." I had not cried, but it had been close. My mother's eyes moved across the room again, slower this time. She was reading the space the way she would read a chart, taking in information, organizing it, making sense of something she hadn't expected to find. "How long?" she asked finally. "The flagship's been open 4 years," I said. "But I've been in business for 6. 6 years," the word sat in the space between us. 6 years of building something she had never once asked about. My father cleared his throat. "The pastries here," he said. He glanced at the case near the window. That's all. Yes, I said. He nodded slowly. He didn't say anything else. One of my staff members approached to take their order, and I stepped back to give them space. I went back to the kitchen. I stood at the stainless steel counter and looked at the morning's production schedule and tried to feel something clear and identifiable, but what I felt was complicated and I didn't have time to sort through it, so I picked up a bench scraper and got back to work. 20 minutes later, my sister appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Can I come in?" "You know you can," I said. She stepped inside. She was in the clothes she'd traveled in. Jeans, a fleece pullover, hair back in a ponytail. She looked like the version of herself I liked best, the one who existed before hospital clothes and hospital manners. "They want to talk to you," she said. I figured. Mom is. She paused. "She's not crying, but she's close." I kept working. Is that supposed to make me feel better or worse? My sister was quiet for a moment. "I knew about some of it," she said. "Not everything. But more than they did. I should have pushed them harder to ask." I looked up. "I should have said something to them," she said. "Years ago. I was so caught up in my own stuff that I let it go on longer than it should have." That surprised me. Not the admission itself, but the directness of it. My sister was not someone who offered apologies easily. It was one of the things we had in common. "You didn't cause it," I said. "I didn't stop it either." We stood there for a moment, the two of us in my kitchen, with the sound of the morning rush on the other side of the wall. "Go talk to them," she said. "You don't have to forgive them. But go talk to them." I found them at the same table, their breakfast mostly untouched. My father had finally taken off his coat. My mother had her hands folded on the table in front of her, the way she used to sit when she was waiting to have a serious conversation with us when we were children. I sat down. For a few seconds, no one said anything. My mother spoke first. "Why didn't you tell us?" I had known this question was coming. I had turned it over in my mind many times, in the years between leaving nursing school and now. "I tried," I said. "When I first left school, I tried to explain what I wanted to do. You didn't want to hear it. So I stopped explaining." She shook her head slowly. "We didn't know you'd built all of." "You didn't ask," I said. My voice was even. I wasn't angry. I'd been angry for years, but the anger had worn itself out somewhere along the way, and what was left was something cleaner. Factual. "You didn't ask what I was doing. You didn't ask if the business was growing. You called my sister every Sunday. You saw me a few times a year and spent most of it telling me what I should have done differently." I paused. "I don't say that to hurt you. I say it because it's true." My father looked at his coffee cup. "I thought." He stopped, started again. "I thought you were struggling. I thought if I asked, I'd have to watch you struggling and not be able to fix it. It was easier to assume you'd figure it out eventually." That was the most honest thing I had ever heard my father say. I took a breath. "I wasn't struggling," I said. "I was building something. Those are different things, and I needed you to at least ask which one it was." My mother's composure finally broke. Not dramatically. She wasn't someone who cried dramatically. Just a quick press of her fingers to her lips, her eyes going bright. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry we made you feel like your choices didn't matter. I'm sorry we never asked." My father nodded. He still wasn't looking at me, but he nodded. "We were wrong," he said. "I was wrong. Calling you." He stopped. I knew he was thinking about the Sunday afternoon when he'd told me I was making bread and expecting them to celebrate it. I was wrong about what success looks like. I had one definition and I applied it to you without ever looking at what you were actually doing. The morning rush continued around us. Plates moved. Coffee was poured. My staff, my people, the 23 of them who had built this thing alongside me, moved through the space with the competence and ease of people who knew their work. My parents watched all of it. Eventually, my father said very quietly, "It's a beautiful place." I looked around my bakery. The morning light was coming through the front windows at a low angle, catching the pastry cases, the copper fixtures I'd picked out myself, the little framed photographs of my grandmother on the wall near the door, her hands, her kitchen, the step stool I used to stand on. "Thank you," I said. The conversation didn't fix everything. I want to be honest about that. Apologies don't undo years of being made to feel small. They can't return the Sunday phone calls that didn't happen, or the dinner party I wasn't invited to, or the moment I stood in their kitchen with a box of pastries that no one touched. An apology acknowledges a debt. It doesn't erase it. But I appreciated that they gave it. My father, especially. He was not a man built for apology, and I could see what it cost him to say what he said. That counted for something. Before they left, my mother stopped near the pastry case. She looked at the Koinaman through the glass for a long time. "Can I try one?" she asked. It was such a small thing. After everything. After years of dismissal and the conversation we'd just had, and the complicated tangle of feelings still sitting in my chest, she was asking if she could try one of my pastries. "Of course," I said. I put one on a plate myself and brought it to her. She took a bite. She was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at me. "This is extraordinary," she said. I didn't tell her that this particular recipe had taken me 3 years to develop. I didn't tell her about the hundreds of failed batches, the early mornings, the shoulder injury I got from hand laminating dough before I figured out a better method. I didn't tell her any of that. Some things you earn the right to know gradually over time through showing up. But I smiled, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, it was a real one. After they were gone, I went back to my kitchen. We had a catering order going out at noon, and 2 custom cake deliveries in the afternoon, and a meeting with my wholesale accounts manager at 3. The day moved forward the way it always did, full and demanding and mine. And standing at my bench, with flour on my hands, I understood something I had been slowly learning for years, but had never quite put into words until that moment. My parents' approval had not built this bakery. My own belief had. The hours I'd put in before anyone could see what I was making. The choices I'd made when I had no proof they were the right ones. The morning I'd signed my first lease with shaking hands, and then gone home and cried, and then gotten up the next day and started working anyway. None of that had required their permission, and none of it had required their praise. I had needed them to see me. I understood that. That need was human and real, and I didn't fault myself for having felt it. But I had built something extraordinary without it, and I think, for the first time, I truly believed that was enough.